The shuttle cleared the atmosphere at 0612 local time, which meant Anastasia had been awake for 19 hours and was running on the particular kind of focus that lives just past exhaustion, the kind that strips away everything unnecessary and leaves you very, very interested in whatever is directly in front of you. What was directly in front of her, currently, was the ceiling of the Vorkai Grand antechamber. It was extraordinary. The architecture curved upward in overlapping arches, each one carved from something that looked like basalt but caught the light differently depending on angle. Blue in the deep shadow, a warm copper at the edges, a strange iridescent green where two surfaces met. The whole effect was geological, like standing inside a mountain that had decided to become a cathedral. She was tilting her head back, trying to work out whether the green was an optical effect or a mineral one, when Counselor Praxis grabbed her elbow. "Eyes forward," he said, very quietly, in the tone he used when he meant it. Anastasia lowered her chin. Forward was 42 Vorkai honor guards in ceremonial formation, standing at a height that made her feel like a child at a dinner table. Their scale plates a deep iridescent black, their eyes, for each, arranged in a shallow arc across the upper face, fixed on the human delegation with the particular stillness of beings who had been trained to look dangerous and were very good at their jobs. "Oh," she said. "How long have they been there?" "Since we entered." "Right." She straightened her jacket. "Sorry." Praxis had already moved ahead to perform the first bow. He did it beautifully, the exact depth, the precise duration, the hands held correctly at the second and fourth joints. 3 years of preparation. Anastasia had attended most of those briefings and retained, apparently, mostly the ceiling. The Alpha King received them from a raised dais at the far end of the chamber. He was larger than the guards, which she hadn't expected, and older-looking, with a stillness that wasn't performance. It was the real kind, the kind that didn't need an audience. He watched the delegation approach with 4 eyes that gave nothing away. Anastasia watched him back and thought, "He's tired." Not physically, the other kind. She didn't know why she thought that. She filed it away next to the ceiling question. The formal greetings proceeded. Praxis spoke with grace and precision. The Vorkai High interpreter translated in a register that somehow conveyed both the meaning and the weight of the occasion. The delegation behind Anastasia was doing what delegations do, standing correctly, breathing quietly, being present in the approved way. She was fine. She was behaving. She had both feet on the floor and her eyes at a reasonable angle, and everything was going smoothly. Then a door opened in the left wall, and an animal came through it. She turned before she meant to. He was large, longer than he was tall, built low to the ground with a dense, almost architectural musculature. His coat the deep reddish black of cooling iron. His head was broad and held low, and he moved with the particular deliberateness of something that had learned not to rush because nothing had ever successfully run from it. For Amber Eyes scanned the room with a flat, professional attention. The entire chamber went still. Not the formal stillness of ceremony. This was the instinctive kind, the kind that lives in the oldest part of any nervous system. Even the guards, who had surely seen this before, seemed to be breathing slightly less. Anastasia heard Praxis, very quietly, say her name in a warning tone. She heard it distantly, the way you hear someone calling you in from outside when you're in the middle of something. The animal's name, she would learn later, was Scar. He had been the Alpha King's war beast for 11 years. He had not permitted a handler to touch him in 9. There were 7 people in this building whose job description included the phrase, "in the event of Scar," and all 7 of them had gone very quiet in the way of people doing rapid personal inventory. Scar crossed the floor toward the delegation. The delegation stepped back, more or less as a unit, in the instinctive way of people who have been told something is safe, but whose bodies have not received the memo. Anastasia stepped forward. Not boldly, not with any particular intention. She just moved toward the interesting thing, the way she always did, because the interesting thing was there and she was here, and the distance between those two facts seemed like a problem worth solving. She crouched down, which put her approximately at eye level with something that could have put her through a wall. Scar stopped. His nostrils flared, a long, slow breath, the kind that was doing real work. His eyes, all 4 of them, fixed on her face with the intensity of a creature running a calculation. She looked back at him steadily. She was thinking about his coat, actually, trying to determine whether the reddish quality was pigment or structural, the way some beetles had. Color that came from the geometry of the scales rather than any dye. She was also thinking. He had the expression of someone who had been waiting a long time in a place he didn't choose, and she recognized that expression because she'd worn it herself in a number of institutional settings. "Hello," she said. "You're a lovely thing, aren't you?" It was not brave. She wasn't suppressing fear. There was simply a question in front of her. That was more interesting than the fear, and the question won, the way it always did. Scar took 3 more steps toward her, slowly, with a kind of deliberateness that seemed less like aggression and more like decision. He put his nose against her outstretched hand. The sound the chamber made was not a sound. It was the absence of sound taken to an extreme. 40-some beings who had all, independently, stopped breathing at the same moment. Anastasia scratched behind what appeared to be the equivalent of his ear. He was warm. The coat was structural. She could feel the texture of it, layered, like overlapping feathers, that had decided to become fur. She made a mental note. Scar made a sound, low, resonant, from somewhere deep in his chest. She didn't know the word for it. There was no word for it, as it turned out, in Vorkai, not because the language was insufficient, but because the thing had never happened before. And you don't build vocabulary for things that never happen. The closest translation, assembled 3 days later by a committee of linguists, was something like, "the ground settling after long rain." The recording from Court System 4 had the best angle. It caught the whole arc of it. Scar's approach, the delegation's retreat, Anastasia's forward step, the crouch, the contact, the sound. It also caught the Alpha King's face. He had been watching with the same flat, unreadable attention he'd held all morning. When Scar made the sound, something shifted, small, almost imperceptible, the way a held breath releases before you're conscious of having held it. His eyes moved from Scar to the human crouched on the floor of his chamber, who was now apparently explaining something to his war beast in a low, conversational tone. Praxis, to his credit, held his position and his composure and only later admitted to a colleague that he had been absolutely certain, for approximately 45 seconds, that he was about to watch a diplomatic incident that would be discussed in Academy courses for the next 200 years. The request came through official channels, which was unusual. Ambassador Turath had not used official channels for informal contact in 30 years. It wasn't done at that level. Between parties who communicated primarily through intermediaries and careful silence. The request was also specific, which was more unusual still. Not the counselor, not the delegation lead, not any of the 3 people in the group with actual diplomatic rank. The junior xenobiologist. By name. Praxis read the request twice, then went to find Anastasia, who was in the room they'd been assigned and appeared to be writing field notes. "Ambassador Turath has requested a private meeting," he said. "With the delegation?" "With you." She looked up. For a moment, she had the expression she got when a data point didn't fit the model. Not alarmed, just recalibrating. "Me specifically?" "You specifically." She thought about this. Then, "Do you know if he has access to Scar's medical history? I have a follow-up question about the code, and I'd rather ask someone who knows him. Personally then." "Anastasia." "Right. Yes. I'll go." Turath received her alone, in a room without ceremony, just 2 chairs and a low table, and the particular quality of afternoon light that the Vorkai homeworld did in a way she hadn't found words for yet. He was old. Old in the way of things that had been watching for a long time and had formed conclusions. He sat with his hands folded and looked at her for a long moment before speaking. "You weren't afraid," he said, "of Scar, of anything. In that room." He paused. "I have been in that room many times. I have watched many delegations. Humans. Others. Everyone is afraid of something in that room. The guards, the king, the protocol, what it means to fail." You looked at the ceiling. Anastasia considered this. "The ceiling is interesting." "Yes." Something in his expression shifted, not warmth exactly, but the threshold of it. "That is what I wanted to understand. Whether it was performance." "It wasn't." "No," he said. "I know. That's why I asked for you." He was quiet for a moment. Outside, the light changed, one of the planet's secondary moons. Crossing in front of something, she guessed, and made a note to check. Scar came to us as a cub, Tarath said, taken from his range. He was trained by people who understood force. He learned, from those people, what the world was. He looked at his hands. He has not revised that understanding in 11 years. Until yesterday. Anastasia was listening now with the full attention she usually reserved for organisms. What you did, Tarath continued, was not diplomatic. It was not strategic. It did not follow any protocol I have seen in 3 decades of service. He met her eyes. It was also the most important thing that has happened in this chamber in 11 years. Because the king watched, and the king has also not revised his understanding of certain things in a very long time. The light shifted again outside. I didn't do anything, she said. He seemed like he was waiting. Yes, said Tarath. He was. A long pause. There are talks, he said carefully, that have not been possible to begin. There are people on both sides who want them to begin and have not known how to make that true. Who have been waiting. He let the word sit. I think you should be present for those talks. Anastasia opened her mouth, then closed it. She thought about Praxis, who had spent 3 years learning every bow. She thought about the ceiling and Scar's coat and the sound. That had no word. I don't know anything about diplomacy, she said. No, said Tarath. And for the first time, something that was definitely the threshold of warmth crossed his face and became the actual thing. That may be exactly right. Later, Praxis would tell the story in the way it became famous. The war beast, the frozen chamber, the woman who stepped forward. He told it well. It was a good story. What he left out, because he hadn't been there, was the part that came after. Anastasia, walking back through the corridor, field notebook in hand, stopping at a window to check the position of the moon, and Scar padding silently up behind her, because no one had thought to put him away, and laying his enormous head against her shoulder, and her reaching up, without looking, to scratch behind his ear, and neither of them finding this remarkable at all.